You're going on safari and you want to get those Instagram-worthy photos that will make your friends jealous, right? Hi, hello, welcome. I'm Lori, a middle-aged, mostly solo female traveler who has been a professional photographer for more than 20 years, and today I'm going to share my top safari photography tips with you. For the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that you've picked your perfect safari location and chosen the perfect time of year to travel, taking into account any unique events like the Great Migration in Kenya and Tanzania. Tip number 1 is choosing the right camera equipment. There's an old saying that goes, the best camera is the one you have with you. And while that is generally true, there are some instances where having higher end camera gear instead of your cell phone will work to your advantage. And taking photos on safari is one of those cases. A full frame camera, whether it be a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, with a good zoom lens is the ideal camera for safari photos. You're going to want to pair it with a long zoom lens, such as a 200 to 600 millimeter lens, and you've got a great setup for photographing wildlife. While this type of camera and long zoom lens can be an expensive investment, there's a more affordable option, and that's renting photography equipment. The Lens Depot in Orlando is my go-to place to rent photography equipment, and I use them to rent gear for my African safari because the 100 to 500 millimeter zoom lens I wanted for safari is not something I'll use on a regular basis. All of that being said, a DSLR or mirrorless camera is only going to be useful if you know how to use it. So if you're buying or renting equipment, do so well in advance and practice, practice, practice. I'll leave a link in the description with the camera gear that I brought with me on my Tanzania safari. Tip number 2 relates to shutter speed. When you're photographing fast-moving wildlife, selecting an appropriate minimum shutter speed is important to ensure sharp images. Fast shutter speed, such as 1/4000th of a second or higher, is necessary to capture animals in motion while also minimizing camera shake. Using shutter priority mode and a high ISO allows you to focus on capturing the action without worrying about your exposure settings and camera shake. And I say this as someone who typically shoots manual mode in like every other instance. Shoot in burst mode with moving animals to get a selection of images to choose from. That being said, don't be afraid to play around with your shutter speed to create striking wildlife images. I was in Tanzania for the Great Migration, and there were thousands of wildebeest streaming across the road in front of our safari vehicle. After capturing photos with a fast shutter speed to freeze the action, I lowered my shutter speed significantly and captured an image where the wildebeest are blurred to give a sense of motion. In my creative opinion, the blur better tells the story of the migration. If you're experimenting with slower shutter speed, don't forget to use a tripod or brace your camera on the roof of your safari vehicle to minimize camera shake. And don't use burst mode with a slow shutter speed because that can also create unwanted camera shake. Tip number 3 is, appropriately enough, the rule of thirds. When taking photos, most people instinctively center the subject in the frame, but this doesn't always create the most pleasing composition. When you compose shots, consider using the rule of thirds. As illustrated by the red grid lines on the lioness photo, the rule of thirds divides an image into thirds, both vertically and horizontally. Placing the thing that you want to draw the most attention to at the intersection of these lines creates a more dynamic composition. Now, that's not to say that centered photos can't be fun. With subjects that are symmetrical, I often center them in the composition. For example, if this lioness had been looking at me straight on, having her centered in the frame would have created a great shot. Tip number 4, focus on the eyes. People will tell you that the eyes are the window to the soul. And if you're capturing a portrait of an animal, you want to be sure to focus on the animal's eyes. If you've got a striking image of a giraffe, but the focus is on the tree branch in front of the animal, it draws the viewer's eye there and away from the giraffe. Tip number 5, always be ready. One of the most important safari photography tips I can give about wildlife photography is to always be ready. You never know when an animal is going to appear out of the brush or if the animal you've been watching is going to get up and pounce on its prey. If you always have your camera at the ready, the opportunities to create amazing wildlife photography on safari are endless. Tip number 6, be extra, and not in the way you're thinking. This is possibly one of the simplest safari photography tips I can give you. Being extra means packing plenty of essential accessories like camera batteries and memory cards. Trust me, you'll kick myself if you miss an amazing shot because you've run out of memory card space or you don't have an extra battery. It's especially important with wildlife photography to keep an eye on how much memory card space is left in the current card you're using so that you don't run out at a crucial moment. If you're getting low on space, swap out the card before it's full. Same goes for camera batteries. Change them out before they die completely. Tip number 7, look for the light. Photographers call the hour after sunrise and the hour before sunset golden hour due to the warm golden light. And since light can make or break a photo, golden hour is a popular time to take photos anywhere, but especially on an African safari. Typically, game drives happen twice a day, and you'll find yourself getting up in the early morning hours for a morning game drive, enjoying a break for lunch, and then going on a sunset game drive. Wildlife photography can be done at any time of day, but I think you'll find that photos taken in the early morning or evening during the golden hours are among some of your favorites. Tip number 8, tell the story. Animal portraits are amazing and one of the most appealing things about doing photography on an African safari, but it's easy to get tunnel vision and photograph just animal portraits. To keep myself from getting stuck in a rut, I focus on a little storytelling technique that I call OPD. OPD stands for Overview, Portrait, and Detail. When I'm photographing wildlife and first come upon an animal, I take the wildlife images that my brain instinctively wants to create. Then I take a step back mentally, and sometimes physically, if space allows, and remind myself OPD. Maybe I've already created a great portrait of the animal, but what about the larger scene that they're part of? Can I get a great overview shot? And is there a fun detail that I can take a close-up shot that adds to the story? And this is one of those photography skills that you can apply to just about anything you photograph, not just wildlife and not just safari. Another one of my favorite photography tips is to look behind you. It's easy to focus on creating wildlife images of the animal that's right in front of you. But what's behind you? Maybe there's something equally or even more interesting that can make for great photos. But if you don't turn around to look, you'll never know. Tip number 9, shoot a lot. This is another one of those super easy safari photography tips, and that is you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. With camera memory cards being relatively cheap, shooting a ton of images on your photo safari means that you can choose the best photos from this once-in-a-lifetime trip and ditch the ones that didn't turn out the way you'd hoped. Whether you're capturing a colorful bird in flight or an elephant ambling through their natural environment, using burst mode allows you to capture a series of photos in rapid succession while keeping all the settings the same. Tip number 10, splurge on a solo tour. Safari vehicles typically seat 7 guests plus the driver. Each guest has their own window, and the roof pops up, allowing you to stand and see the wildlife around you. However, if you're on the right side of the vehicle and all the action is happening on the left side, it can be a bit overwhelming, frustrating, and hard to capture the best shots, especially if the vehicle is moving. For that reason, I strongly suggest booking a private tour for you and your group. This way, it's only the people you're traveling with, making it easier to capture the good photos you crave. Additionally, a solo tour allows your guide to focus on your group's specific photography needs and provide personalized attention. This can make a significant difference in the quality of your safari photography experience, as you'll have more opportunities to capture those perfect shots without any distraction. If you choose to take a tour in a shared vehicle, it's important to have realistic expectations about what you may or may not be able to see and point your camera at. Tip number 11, practice patience. Observe the behavior of the animals and anticipate their movements. Be patient and shoot a lot. You'll be spending time parked and waiting while you observe the animals, especially during the golden hour. Take a breath and enjoy it. Keep your camera in hand and wait to see what they do. Consider different angles that you can shoot. Think about changing lenses to create a new composition. Above all, practice patience. The animals are on their timeline and not yours, and being patient can allow for some amazing opportunities to unfold in front of you. Tip number 12, respect. Your safety and the safety of the animal is your guide's top priority. Listen to your guide's directions, as they're familiar with the unpredictable nature of wild animals and can not only guide you on how to safely observe them, but also how to get great photos. Harassing the animals or disturbing their natural habitat is frowned upon and disrespectful, so don't do it. The same goes for local people. Show them respect and ask if you can take a photo rather than just shoving your camera in someone's face. A little courtesy and respect go a long way. So those are my 12 tips for great safari photography. Drop a like, let me know your favorite tip in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more travel content. Thanks for watching.